The crowd went quiet, not because of the price, but because of the name being read aloud. Spring 1844. Charleston Auction Yard. The auctioneer stood on a platform of raw pine boards, sweat already staining his collar, though the morning air still carried a chill. Behind him, a man waited, barefoot, hands at his sides, eyes fixed on nothing. The auctioneer cleared his throat and lifted the bill of sale. "Skilled in kitchen work and herb cultivation," he announced. His voice carried across the yard, over the heads of planters and traders who'd gathered from 3 counties. 32 years of age. No history of running. No marks of disobedience. A few men nodded. Standard enough. Then the auctioneer read the opening bid. Starting at $800. Silence dropped like a stone into water. $800 was field hand money, premium field hand money. Kitchen workers went for $500, maybe $600 on a good day. This wasn't just high. This was wrong. The man on the platform didn't move, didn't blink. If he felt the stares, he showed nothing. Welcome to Black Earth Stories. Before we continue, please like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss any story. In the back row, a trader in a gray coat closed his ledger. Not slowly, not casually. He snapped it shut, tucked it under his arm, and walked toward the street. Fast. 3 others watched him go. Their faces said they understood something the rest didn't. The auctioneer waited. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted their weight, boots scraping dirt. Then a voice cut through. "I'll take him." Thomas Whitaker stepped forward from the middle of the crowd. Older man. Thin. Moved like his bones hurt. He held up a hand, and the auctioneer nodded once. Sold to Thomas Whitaker of Charleston County. $800. No counter bid. No competition. Just relief rippling through the yard like wind through dry grass. The man on the platform, Samuel, the bill of sale called him, finally moved. He stepped down, walked toward Whitaker without being told. His face revealed nothing. No fear. No hope. Just a stillness that felt deliberate. Whitaker signed the papers. Money changed hands. The transaction took less than 3 minutes. As they left, an overseer leaned toward another and muttered, "Why'd the last owner sell him so quick?" The other man shook his head. "Don't know. Don't want to." No one asked why the previous owner sold him so fast. They should have. Because 6 months later, Thomas Whitaker would be dead. And the man who bought him would be dead too. And so would the man after that. 11 men, in total. But in the spring of 1844, standing in that auction yard with the sun breaking through the clouds, no one knew yet. No one except Samuel. The quarters sat behind the main house, a row of cabins built from cypress wood gone gray with age. Samuel's was at the end. Smaller than the others. A single room with a rope bed, a tin wash basin, and a window that faced the kitchen garden. Better than the field quarters where 20 people slept on dirt floors. Worse than anything a free man would call shelter. Thomas Whitaker met him at the door the first evening. The old man wheezed as he climbed the back steps, one hand pressed to his chest like he was trying to hold his ribs together. "You'll cook for me," Whitaker said. "Not a question. Breakfast, supper, and whatever I need between. The kitchen's yours. No one else touches it." "Yes, sir." "And the garden. Behind the toolshed. Grow whatever keeps me alive." Samuel nodded once. Whitaker studied him for a long moment, eyes watery and suspicious. "They said you know herbs. Medicine plants. I know their names. Their uses." "Good." Whitaker turned to leave, then stopped. "Don't make me regret buying you." Samuel waited until the old man disappeared into the house before stepping inside his cabin. He placed his few belongings on the floor, a cloth bundle, a wooden spoon worn smooth, and a leather-bound journal wrapped in oilcloth. The journal was the only thing that mattered. His routine began before sunrise. The kitchen first, stoking the fire, measuring flour and salt for bread. Then the garden while dew still clung to the leaves. He moved between rows of feverfew, foxglove, valerian, belladonna. Touched each plant like he was checking a pulse. Twice a week, Whitaker sent him to the Charleston market. Samuel walked alone, a signed pass folded in his pocket. Freedom that wasn't freedom. He bought provisions, spoke to no one, and returned before noon. In the kitchen, he worked in silence. Cutting, grinding, brewing. His hands moved with precision that looked like instinct but wasn't. Every measurement deliberate. Every combination intentional. Within a month, Whitaker's cough eased. Within 2, the old man slept through the night without gasping. By the 3rd month, Whitaker had gained weight and stopped clutching his chest. "You're a miracle," Whitaker told him one morning, color returning to his face. Samuel kept his eyes down. "Just doing what I know, sir." The other enslaved people noticed things. Caleb, who worked the stables, saw Samuel writing in his cabin after dark. Saw the journal, pages covered in marks that didn't look like words. "What's that you're keeping?" Caleb asked one night. Samuel closed the book. "Records." "Records of what?" "Plants. Measurements. What works?" Caleb leaned closer, squinting at the page. Strange symbols. Diagrams that might have been flowers or might have been something else. Letters that didn't form sentences. "That ain't English." "No," Samuel said. "It's not." Caleb didn't ask again, but he told the others, and they watched Samuel differently after that. Not with fear. Not with trust either. With something closer to unease. Because a slave who could read was dangerous enough. A slave who could write in code was something else entirely. By late summer, Thomas Whitaker looked 10 years younger. The dinner parties started again in September. Candlelight through tall windows. Silver polished until it threw reflections across white tablecloths. 6 planters and their wives gathered in the dining room, talking crops and prices and politics while Samuel moved between them like a shadow. "This duck is extraordinary," one of the wives said. Fork paused midair. "Thomas, wherever did you find such a cook?" Whitaker leaned back in his chair, glass of wine catching the light. "Estate sale up in Beaufort. Best investment I've made in years." Investment. The man across from him, James Thornton, lean and sharp-eyed, set down his knife. "That's one word for it. What would you call it?" Whitaker asked. "A miracle." Thornton's gaze followed Samuel as he refilled water glasses. "You were barely walking 3 months ago. Now look at you." Whitaker grinned. "The boy knows herbs. Medicinal plants. Keeps me alive better than any doctor in Charleston." "A miracle worker," another planter added, raising his glass. "That's what they're calling him at the market." "Finest cook in the Lowcountry," someone else agreed. Samuel stood near the wall, hands folded, eyes fixed on the floorboards. His face showed nothing. Not pleasure. Not pride. Just the blank mask slaves learned to wear when white people spoke about them like furniture. Thornton kept watching him. Not the casual glance of a man noticing a servant. Something more deliberate. More measuring. "Does he speak?" Thornton asked. "When spoken to," Whitaker said. "And the rest of the time?" "Silent as a stone." Thornton nodded slowly, still staring. Samuel felt the weight of it, but didn't look up. Didn't move. At the far end of the table, Henry Whitaker, Thomas's younger brother, already drunk, laughed too loud. "Miracles in chains," he said, slurring the words. "That's the South for you. Can't let a good thing go free, can we?" A few uncomfortable chuckles. Thomas shot his brother a look, but Henry just poured himself more wine. "Careful, brother," Henry continued. "Miracles have a way of vanishing when you're not watching." "Henry, that's enough. I'm just saying." Henry raised his glass toward Samuel. "You keep your miracle close, Thomas. Real close." Samuel didn't react, didn't blink. Just waited for the next instruction, the next pour, the next silence. The dinner ended near midnight. The guests left in carriages that rattled down the drive, lanterns swinging in the dark. Samuel cleared plates, scrubbed pots, banked the kitchen fire. Then he walked back to his cabin. The journal lay beneath the loose floorboard under his bed. Samuel pulled it out, opened to a page near the middle. Names written in small, precise script. Dates beside them. Symbols in the margins. At the bottom of the list, Thomas Whitaker, September 1844. Samuel picked up his pen, dipped it in ink made from walnut husks, and beside Whitaker's name, he drew a small cross. Careful, deliberate, no bigger than a thumbprint. He stared at it for a long moment, then closed the book. He had drawn 11 of these crosses before, and he would draw 11 more. Thomas Whitaker died on a Tuesday in late October. The housemaid found him at dawn, still in bed, hands folded across his chest like he'd arranged himself for a coffin. His face looked peaceful, almost content. The doctor arrived by mid-morning, black bag in hand, spectacles perched on his nose. He examined the body, checked the eyes and tongue, pressed fingers against the cold neck. "Heart failure," he announced to the room. Henry Whitaker stood by the window, already dressed in black. Not unexpected for a man of his age and condition. He'd been ill for years. He was better, Henry said. These last few months, he was better. The doctor shrugged. The heart doesn't negotiate. Sometimes it simply stops. Samuel stood in the doorway, waiting to be dismissed. His expression hadn't changed since they'd called him in. No shock. No grief. Just that same blank stillness he wore like a second skin. Henry noticed. "You don't seem surprised." "No, sir." "Why not? You were supposed to be keeping him alive." Samuel's voice came out flat, measured. "I kept him comfortable. That's all anyone can do." Henry stared at him for a long moment, then waved him away. "Get out." The will was read 3 days later in the parlor. Everything passed to Henry. The house, the land, the debts, and the people. 17 enslaved workers. Samuel among them. Henry kept him on immediately. Not out of sentiment. Out of need. "You'll do for me what you did for Thomas," Henry told him that first night. "Keep me healthy. Keep me strong." "Yes, sir." But Henry wasn't like Thomas. Where the older brother had been weak and cautious, Henry was loud and reckless. He drank whiskey before noon, gambled away money they didn't have. And when the anger came, thick and sudden as a summer storm, he took it out on whoever was closest. Caleb took a beating for dropping a saddle. Ruth got the back of Henry's hand for burning cornbread. Elijah spent 2 nights locked in the cellar for looking at Henry wrong. But Samuel stayed untouched. Henry never raised a hand to him. Never even raised his voice. It wasn't kindness. It was something else. Something that looked like caution. One night in late November, Henry stumbled into the kitchen drunk, bottle half empty in his fist. Samuel was at the table, grinding dried roots with a pestle. Henry leaned against the doorframe, swaying. "You're a strange one, you know that?" Samuel didn't look up. "Sir, you don't fight. You don't run. You don't even flinch when I'm shouting." Henry took a long pull from the bottle. "You just wait." Samuel stopped grinding, set down the pestle, and for the first time since Henry had inherited him, he looked up, met the man's eyes directly. "Yes, sir," he said. "I wait." Henry laughed, a sharp, bark-like sound, but it died fast. Something in Samuel's tone stripped the humor out of it. Something cold and patient and final. Henry left without another word. That night, Samuel prepared Henry's evening broth. chamomile for sleep, valerian for calm, and something else. Something measured in drops so small they disappeared into the liquid like secrets. 3 months later, Henry Whittaker would be dead. But not yet. First, he had to believe he was safe. Henry Whittaker collapsed during a card game on a Friday night in February. He'd been at James Thornton's estate, drinking bourbon and losing money he didn't have. One moment he was laughing at a joke. The next, his face went white and he grabbed the edge of the table. Henry! Thornton half rose from his chair. Henry's whole body convulsed. Cards scattered. The glass fell. Bourbon spreading across green felt like blood. They carried him to a guest room. Sent for the doctor. But by the time the man arrived, Henry was burning with fever, skin slick with sweat, eyes rolled back. He died 3 hours before sunrise. The doctor stood over the body, shaking his head. Cholera, most likely. Sudden onset. Violent progression. No one else is sick, Thornton said. Doesn't mean it wasn't cholera. Sometimes it takes one and leaves the rest. Thornton didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. Death was common enough. Explanations didn't need to be perfect. The estate settlement took 2 weeks. Henry had died owing more than he owned. Everything went to creditors except the people. They were divided up, sold off, transferred as payment. Samuel went to James Thornton. Thornton was different from the Whittaker brothers. Colder. More deliberate. He kept ledgers for everything. Seed purchases, harvest yields, every lash given, every slave birth and burial. His world ran on numbers and order. Samuel fit into it like a key in a lock. "You'll cook for me," Thornton told him the first day. "And you'll keep the herb garden. I've heard what you can do." "Yes, sir. I don't tolerate waste. Or mistakes." "No, sir." Thornton studied him the way a man studies a tool before using it. Then nodded once. "We'll get along fine." Samuel worked with the same quiet precision he'd always used. Measuring roots by the grain. Brewing teas to exact temperatures. Noting everything in his journal, which plants helped sleep, which eased pain, which did something else entirely. 6 weeks after Samuel arrived, Thornton developed stomach pains. Sharp cramps that bent him double after meals. "What can you do about this?" Thornton asked, wincing. Samuel prepared a tea. Foxglove for the heart. Small amounts of nightshade to calm the spasms. "Drink this twice daily," Samuel said. "It will help." And it did. For a while. Thornton improved. The pains lessened. He started trusting Samuel with more, preparing all his meals, mixing medicines, managing the kitchen garden without supervision. "You're keeping me alive," Thornton told him one evening, gratitude thick in his voice. Samuel's face remained blank. "Yes, sir. I am keeping you alive." The words hung in the air just a moment too long. But Thornton didn't notice. He was already feeling better. Fall turned to winter. 1844 became 1845. By January, 5 plantation owners in Charleston County were dead. Thomas Whittaker, Henry Whittaker, a rice planter named Boone, a merchant who'd rented Samuel for a dinner party, another man who'd borrowed him to cook for a wedding. All of them gone within months of employing the same cook. But no one made the connection. Enslaved people moved between estates all the time. Sold, inherited, loaned out. Samuel was skilled and quiet. No one thought to track where he'd been. No one thought to ask. They didn't see the pattern because they didn't believe a slave could have one. James Thornton died in April. By May, Samuel stood in another auction yard. Different city this time, Columbia. Different crowd. Same process. The man who bought him wasn't old or sick or desperate. Charles Harrington was 34, clean-shaven, sharp suit, eyes that missed nothing. He owned 2 plantations, sat on the state assembly, and had ambitions that reached all the way to Washington. He walked up to Samuel before the paperwork was even signed. "I've heard of you," Harrington said. Samuel kept his eyes down. "Sir, they say you're exceptional in the kitchen. They say you kept Thomas Whitaker alive longer than any doctor in Charleston could manage." "I did my best, sir." Harrington tilted his head slightly. "And yet he still died." Samuel said nothing. "So did his brother. So did James Thornton." Harrington's voice stayed pleasant, conversational, but his eyes never left Samuel's face. "Interesting, don't you think? All that skill, and they still died. Death comes for everyone, sir." "Yes." Harrington smiled. "It does." The rules started the first night. Samuel was in the kitchen, unpacking his tools, when Harrington walked in. No warning. No announcement. "New policy," Harrington said. "Every meal you prepare, you eat from it first. Same pot. Same portions. Before it goes to my table." Samuel's hands stilled on the counter. Just for a second. Then he nodded. "Yes, sir." "Every meal," Harrington repeated. "Breakfast, supper, everything in between." "I understand." Harrington watched him for a long moment, then left. For 3 months, Samuel ate everything he cooked. Grits and bacon at dawn. Roasted chicken at supper. Stews and breads and vegetables pulled fresh from the garden. Every bite that went to Harrington's table passed through Samuel's mouth first, and it took a toll. His face thinned. Cheekbones pressed sharp against skin. His hands started trembling when he held a knife. At night, in his cabin, he leaned over the basin and vomited quietly, stomach rejecting what it couldn't process. His journal entries grew shorter, less detailed. Sometimes just a date and a single word. Waiting. The other enslaved people noticed. Caleb asked once if he was sick. "No," Samuel said. "You're wasting away. I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. He was dying slowly, consuming things that weren't meant to be consumed. Not in these combinations. Not at these doses. Still, he never complained. Never refused a meal. Never showed Harrington anything but obedience. And slowly, Harrington began to relax. By late summer, he stopped watching Samuel eat. Stopped checking the kitchen at odd hours. He hosted dinners again, showing off his household, his cook, his control. "See," he told his guests one night in August. "Nothing to worry about. Just a skilled worker doing skilled work." The guests agreed, raised their glasses, praised the meal. Samuel served them all in silence. Face blank, hands steady again, because something had changed. 3 days after the dinner party, Harrington woke with a headache. Nothing severe. Just pressure behind his eyes. A slight nausea. By evening, it was worse. By midnight, he couldn't stand without dizziness. The doctor came at dawn. Examined him. Found nothing obvious. "Could be anything," the doctor said. "Bad air. Spoiled food. Change of weather." "It wasn't the food," Harrington insisted. "My cook eats everything I eat. He's fine." And Samuel was fine. Standing in the doorway. Waiting for instructions. Because what Harrington didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Samuel had been eating the antidotes while Harrington consumed the poison. The same meals. Different effects. Roots that countered roots. Leaves that neutralized leaves. Doses so carefully balanced that Samuel suffered just enough to seem innocent, while Harrington absorbed compounds that built in his blood like sediment in a river. Slow. Cumulative. Invisible. The same pot, but not the same fate. Harrington lasted a week. Longer than Thomas Whitaker. Longer than Henry. Long enough for the headaches to turn into convulsions. Long enough for his skin to yellow and his eyes to sink back into his skull. long enough to become suspicious. On the 5th day, he sent for the sheriff. The man arrived that evening, tired, skeptical, boots covered in road dust. He stood at Harrington's bedside while the sick man tried to speak through chattering teeth. "They cook." Harrington's hand lifted, trembling, pointing toward the corner where Samuel stood. "He's somethings." The sheriff looked at Samuel, then back at Harrington. "What about him? He eats same food, but he's—" "Sir, you're not making sense." Harrington's face twisted in frustration. His finger jabbed the air again, more insistent. But the words wouldn't come. Just fragments, gasps, sounds that meant nothing. The doctor leaned in, pressing a hand to Harrington's forehead. "Fever's making him confused. It does that sometimes. Makes them see things that aren't there. I'm not." Harrington tried to sit up, failed, fell back against the pillows. "Ledger, check the—" His hand reached toward the shelf across the room, the one lined with record books. He kept reaching even as the strength left his arm, fingers grasping at nothing. Samuel stood perfectly still, face blank, eyes on the floor. The sheriff watched for another minute, then shook his head. "I'll come back when he's coherent." He never got the chance. Harrington died on a Sunday morning, just after sunrise. His hand was still extended toward the shelf, frozen in mid-reach. Eyes open, mouth forming a word no one would ever hear. They gave Samuel one night in the quarters before the estate transfer. He sat on the floor of his cabin, journal open in his lap, when Amos pushed through the door. Amos was older, gray at the temples, worked the cotton press, knew how to keep his head down and his mouth shut. "Until now." "You doing this?" Amos asked. Samuel didn't look up. "I'm asking you straight. You killing these men?" Silence. Amos stepped closer. "How many?" Samuel's hand stopped moving across the page. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, quietly, "Not enough." The words hung in the small space between them. Amos exhaled slow, like he'd been holding his breath. "Why?" Samuel reached beneath the journal, pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it carefully. A document. Old. Edges brown and brittle. He handed it to Amos. It was a will. Dated December 1839. Written in careful script at the top. "Last will and testament of Dr. Edmund Pritchard, Richmond, Virginia." Amos couldn't read most of it, but Samuel pointed to a line near the middle. "Read it aloud. To my apprentice Samuel, trained in pharmaceutical sciences and heir to my medical knowledge, I grant his freedom upon my death, along with $50 and my collection of botanical texts." Amos looked up. "This is real. It was never filed. What happened?" Samuel's voice came out flat. "Empty. The doctor's son inherited everything, including me. He sold me south 3 weeks later. Kept the money. Burned the books." Amos stared at the document, at the promise written there in ink that didn't fade. "So you decided." "If promises could be broken," Samuel said, folding the will back into its cloth, "so could men." The 8th death came in late September. A planter named Reynolds in Orangeburg County. Stomach pains, fever, gone within 4 days. The 9th happened 2 weeks later. A rice merchant in Georgetown who'd hired Samuel for a private dinner. Found dead in his study, face down on the desk. The 10th was in early November. A tobacco farmer outside Columbia. He'd borrowed Samuel from a neighbor for a harvest celebration. 3 men. 3 counties. 1 month. And finally, someone noticed. A judge in Columbia named Wickham pulled the records. Went through estate transfers, auction receipts, employment contracts. Found the name that appeared in every transaction. Samuel. Cook. Herb cultivator. The pattern was undeniable. By mid-November, Wickham issued an order. Investigators dispatched. Bounty hunters hired. Notices posted in every county courthouse from Charleston to the North Carolina border. The descriptions went out on printed sheets. Wanted for questioning. Enslaved man, approximately 32 years of age, medium height, dark skin, quiet demeanor. Skilled in cooking and medicinal plants. Answers to the name Samuel. May be traveling under false papers. Reward, $300 for information leading to capture. The terror spread faster than the notices. Plantation owners fired their kitchen staffs overnight. Entire households of enslaved cooks turned out, replaced with white hires or left empty. Some owners stopped eating cooked meals altogether. Cold bread, raw vegetables, anything that didn't pass through hands they didn't trust. Others locked their kitchens, stood guard while food was prepared, watched every movement, every ingredient, every pot. But Samuel was already gone. Rumors filled the vacuum. Some said he'd fled north through the underground routes, smuggled out by abolitionists. Others claimed patrollers had caught him near the border and shot him on sight. A few swore his body was rotting in the Cooper River swamps, fed to alligators by bounty hunters who wanted the reward without the paperwork. And a handful, just a handful, whispered something stranger. That he'd never been a slave at all. That he was something else. A spirit. A curse. Retribution given form. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. Samuel moved through a network most white people didn't know existed. Safe houses. Back roads. People who asked no questions and expected no answers. In a cabin 15 miles west of Charleston, he sat at a rough-hewn table while a woman named Miriam cut his hair. Short. Uneven. Nothing like the neat style he'd worn before. "You can't use that name anymore," she said, scissors flashing in candlelight. "I know. You need papers. New ones. I have them." She paused, looked at his face. "How many more?" Samuel didn't answer. "They're hunting you. Every road. Every town. Let them hunt." Miriam set down the scissors. "You can't kill them all." "No." Samuel's voice came out quiet. Final. "But I can kill enough." By December, the manhunt intensified. Checkpoints on major roads. Patrollers stopping anyone who fit the description. Rewards increased to $500. They were hunting a cook named Samuel. They didn't know he'd already become someone else. 3 weeks into the manhunt, a traveling preacher arrived at the Georgetown estate of William Boone. He came on foot, dust on his boots, Bible tucked under one arm, clean clothes, gentle voice, a leather satchel that smelled of dried herbs and old paper. Boone's overseer met him at the gate. "Help you?" The preacher smiled. "Just passing through. Wondered if I might offer blessings to your household. No charge. Just service." The overseer hesitated. But preachers were common enough on the roads. And this one looked harmless. "Wait here." He returned 5 minutes later. "Mr. Boone says you can stay 3 days. Sleep in the barn. Kitchen will feed you. Much obliged." The preacher gave his name as Reverend Samuel. No last name. No church affiliation. Just a man doing the Lord's work, he said. He spent the first day walking the grounds, speaking softly to the enslaved workers, offering prayers, listening more than he talked. Esther, the cook, found him in the garden that evening. She was 40-something, gray threading through her hair, hands scarred from years of kitchen work. "You know plants," she said. Not a question. The preacher looked up from the rosemary he'd been examining. "Some." "What's that one?" She pointed to a cluster of pale flowers near the fence. "Hemlock. Beautiful. Deadly." Esther studied him. "You're not like other preachers." "How so?" "Most of them talk about suffering. Acceptance. You just watch." The preacher stood, brushed dirt from his hands. Watching is a kind of prayer too. On the second day, he shared a meal with Esther in the kitchen. Showed her a recipe for a stew, root vegetables, wild herbs, something he called a tonic for strength. "Where'd you learn this?" she asked. "A doctor I knew. Long time ago." "You worked for a doctor?" In a manner of speaking. Esther wrote down the recipe as he spoke. Careful measurements. Specific plants. She didn't ask why he was teaching her. Didn't ask why this particular combination. Some things you just knew not to question. That evening, William Boone summoned the preacher to the main house. Boone was a thick man, red-faced, rich off the buying and selling of human beings. He sat behind a desk covered in ledgers and bills of sale, whiskey glass in hand. "Heard you've been preaching to my workers," Boone said. "Offering comfort, sir. That's all." Boone laughed. "Comfort. That's a good one. You think prayer's going to save them?" The preacher's expression didn't change. "No, sir. Prayer is for the living. Justice is for the dead." Boone laughed harder, slapping the desk. "Justice? From who?" "God. From whoever's willing to deliver it." The humor drained from Boone's face. He studied the preacher for a long moment, then waved him away. "Get out. You leave tomorrow." "Yes, sir." The preacher left at dawn on the third day. Esther walked him to the gate. "You take care," he said. She nodded. "You too." He looked at her one more time. "That recipe I taught you. Use it soon." "Why?" "Because some men don't deserve to keep breathing." Then he was gone. Down the road. Into the morning mist. 4 days later, William Boone died in his office. He'd been eating lunch, the stew Esther had prepared using the preacher's recipe. He made it halfway through the bowl before the convulsions started. The doctor came. Found nothing obvious. Called it a sudden illness, possibly the heart. The sheriff questioned everyone. Got to Esther last. "Who taught you that recipe?" Esther didn't hesitate. "A traveling preacher. Stayed here a week back." "What was his name?" "Don't remember. He didn't stay long." This was a lie. She remembered every word he'd said. Every measurement. Every plant. The way he'd looked at her in the garden and told her watching was a kind of prayer. But she didn't tell the sheriff any of that. Because she understood what the preacher had done. What she'd helped him do. And she'd made her choice. She would carry that secret until the day she died. Some debts, she decided, were meant to be paid. 6 months after William Boone's death, investigators returned to Charles Harrington's estate. They'd been through it before. Right after Harrington died. Found nothing then except account books and correspondence. Normal things. Expected things. But a tip came in, anonymous letter delivered to Judge Wickham's office. 3 words, "Check the desk." So they came back. Autumn 1846. 3 men with authorization to tear the place apart if necessary. They started in Harrington's study. The desk was mahogany. Heavy. Drawers lined with green felt. One of the investigators, a man named Porter, ran his hands along the interior, feeling for inconsistencies. His fingers caught on something. A seam. Almost invisible. "Here," he said. They pried it open. False bottom. Shallow space beneath the lowest drawer. Inside, a ledger. Small. Leather-bound. No title on the cover. Porter opened it. The first page contained a list. Names written in neat columns. Dates beside them. Thomas Whitaker, October 1844. Henry Whitaker, February 1845. James Thornton, April 1845. Benjamin Reynolds, September 1845. Down the page. 11 names total. All plantation owners. All dead. "Sweet merciful God," one of the investigators whispered. Porter turned the page. More details. Transactions. Purchases. Where Samuel had been bought, sold, transferred. Every movement tracked. Every death documented. Then, near the back, a separate page. Different handwriting. Cleaner. More deliberate. Porter read it aloud. Samuel was never just a cook. He was a pharmacist, trained by his first master, Dr. Edmund Pritchard of Richmond, Virginia. The doctor taught him the properties of every plant, every poison, every antidote. He was meant to inherit his freedom upon the doctor's death, as promised in a will dated December 1839. The will was never filed. The doctor's son sold Samuel south instead, keeping the inheritance for himself. Samuel did not run. He did not rebel. He simply began to wait. And one by one, he made them pay for a promise that should have been kept. The room went silent. Porter continued to the final line. They will never find him. He has already learned to become someone else. He closed the ledger slowly, looked at the other investigators. One of them, a younger man, face pale, spoke first. This is a confession. Not a confession, Porter said. An explanation. Who wrote it? Porter examined the handwriting again, compared it to Samuel's known writing, samples taken from kitchen records, herb garden logs. The script didn't match. Different slant. Different pressure. I don't know. Could be Samuel himself. Changed his hand deliberately. Could be someone else entirely. The third investigator leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Why leave it here? Why not destroy it? Because someone wanted us to find it, Porter said. Why? So we'd know. So the story wouldn't die with him. They stood there, 3 men holding evidence of 11 murders, and felt something none of them wanted to name. Horror, certainly. But also something else. Something that felt disturbingly close to admiration. What do we do with this? The younger investigator asked. Porter looked at the ledger, at the names, at the careful documentation of methodical revenge. We file it, he said finally, and we keep looking. But they all knew the truth. Someone wanted them to know. Someone wanted the story preserved. And whoever that someone was, they were long gone. No trace of Samuel was ever confirmed after 1846. The manhunt continued through winter. Bounty hunters scoured the countryside. Patrollers stopped every black man on every road, checking papers, asking questions. Rewards climbed to $800. Nothing. Historians would argue about it for decades. Some insisted he'd escaped north via the Underground Railroad, smuggled through safe houses until he reached free soil. Others claimed he'd died in the swamps, caught by patrollers, shot on sight, body left for the alligators. A few believed he'd never left South Carolina at all, that he was buried in some unmarked grave, killed by someone who wanted the reward but not the attention. But then the reports started coming in. Scattered. Years apart. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Georgia, 1851. A plantation owner outside Savannah died suddenly. Stomach pains, fever, gone in 3 days. He'd recently hired a new cook, middle-aged man, quiet, exceptional with herbs. The cook vanished the day after the funeral. Alabama, 1855. A cotton merchant in Montgomery collapsed during dinner. Doctors found no obvious cause. His household staff mentioned a traveling herbalist who'd visited the week before, shared remedies with the kitchen workers, then moved on. Mississippi, 1859. A state legislator died at his desk. He'd been eating lunch prepared by a cook borrowed from a neighboring estate. The cook had impeccable references. 3 different plantation owners vouched for him. All 3 were now dead. Authorities never connected these cases to the South Carolina murders. Too much time had passed. Too much distance. Different states, different jurisdictions, different names. But there were commonalities. Patterns buried in the details. The deceased in Georgia had inherited his plantation through a disputed will. The merchant in Montgomery had built his fortune selling families apart. The legislator in Mississippi had once owned a doctor's apprentice, sold him south after the doctor died, despite documented promises of freedom. Those who knew, those who remembered, whispered about it. In kitchens, in quarters, in the spaces where enslaved people spoke truths white folks never heard. They said the man from South Carolina was still out there, still working, still waiting. They said he'd learned to move like smoke, change names, change faces, become whoever he needed to be. They said he kept a list, and the list was longer than anyone knew. But these were just rumors, stories told in the dark. Nothing that could be proven, nothing except the bodies. The pattern didn't stop in 1846. It simply became quieter, more patient, exactly like the man who started it. The ledger from Harrington's desk supposedly still exists. There's a Charleston archive, 3rd floor, restricted section, climate-controlled room behind 2 locked doors. Historians who know about it say the ledger sits in a box marked Evidence, Unsolved Cases, 1840 to 1850. Rarely accessed, almost never requested. Some claim it was destroyed years ago, burned to avoid panic. Too dangerous to keep, they say. Too inflammatory. The kind of document that could inspire the wrong kind of questions. Others insist it's still there, waiting. Those who claim to have seen it, and there aren't many, describe something the investigators never mentioned in their official reports. A final page, added later. Same handwriting as the explanation, but different ink. Darker, more recent. The page contains calculations. Not just the 11 deaths documented in South Carolina. More names, locations, dates spanning nearly 2 decades. Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, North Carolina, Virginia. Plantation owners, merchants, politicians, overseers. 23 additional names between 1846 and 1865. Each entry includes a single notation beside the name. Brief, cryptic, broken promise, sold children, inherited through theft, owned apprentice unlawfully. One historian, an elderly woman who spent 30 years researching antebellum South Carolina, claimed she saw the ledger in 1987. She was allowed 15 minutes. No photographs. No copies. She described the list. The names she recognized. The ones she didn't. And she described the final sentence, written at the bottom of that last page in the same careful hand. She remembered it word for word because she said it made her blood go cold. 11 is not the end. It is only what they know. When asked what she thought it meant, she paused for a long time. It means there were more, she said finally. Many more. And whoever kept that ledger wanted someone to understand the scope of it. Not just 11 angry murders. A campaign. Methodical. Spanning years. Do you think Samuel wrote it? I think someone who knew him did. Or someone who wanted his work remembered. Why? She looked out the window of her office, toward the Charleston streets below. Because some debts, she said, don't get forgiven just because time passes. The archive denies the ledger exists. But the requests keep coming. And every few years, someone claims to have seen it. The final page. The list that doesn't end. So the question remains, was Samuel a murderer or an agent of justice? The answer depends on who you ask. He killed 11 men. Maybe more. Methodically. Patiently. Without mercy. Those men had enslaved people. Bought and sold human beings. Brutalized them. Separated families. Built wealth on stolen labor and broken promises. Samuel was promised freedom. It was written down, documented, legal, and it was stolen from him. So he chose poison over rebellion, patience over violence, precision over rage. Some say he was a monster, a killer who justified murder with grievance. They point to the bodies, the deliberate planning, the cold efficiency of it. Others say he was a ghost, retribution given form, justice delayed but not denied. They point to the ledger, the calculations, the careful selection of targets. A few say he was something else entirely. A man who understood that the system couldn't be fought with strength. Not when strength meant whips and chains and patrols with dogs. Only with knowledge. Only with time. Only with the very tools they taught him. They trained him to heal. He learned to harm. They gave him access to their kitchens, their tables, their trust. And he used every bit of it. The final question is never answered. Did Samuel die free? No grave was ever found. No record of his death exists. No confirmation of his escape. He simply vanished into history, into rumor, into the spaces between documented facts. But there's one more thing. In 1863, a field hospital in Virginia recorded the death of a medic named Samuel Reed. He had no family, no history, but in his possession was a journal written in botanical symbols and scriptural code. The hospital burned that same year. The journal was never recovered. Some say it never existed. Just another story, another myth. Others say it still does, locked away somewhere, waiting for someone to decode it. And inside, they say, is a list. A list that doesn't end at 11. A list that doesn't end at 23. A list that simply stops. As if the writer knew he would never finish. Or as if he knew someone else would. What do you think of this story? Leave your comment below and tell me what you think about this complex story. If you found this exploration compelling, if it made you think about how power operates and who pays the price when the powerful seek to protect themselves, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who appreciates history's darker truths. The past is never as simple as we wish it were. And the stories that make us most uncomfortable are often the ones most worth remembering because they teach us something essential about human nature and the structures of power that shape all our lives. See you in the next video.